Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. This is still live from the Heartland for the week of September 5th. And my next guest is no stranger to the show. He's been a guest numerous times, but it's been a little bit of while since the last time. He's Fred Klonsky. He's an artist. He's a teacher, a longtime union activist. He's a red diaper baby. He now lives in the great city of New York, in Brooklyn, in the People's Republic of Park Slope. And we miss him here in Chicago, but we figured he would be a guy with a keen eye to tell us about the mayoral race that's going on in New York between a number of candidates and a certain guy named Mamdani. And that's Zohran Mamdani. Hello there, Fred. How are you?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
We're good. So tell us about your move to New York and how you got involved in this campaign.
Well, we picked up and left Chicago a little over a year ago. You know, we had a little house in Logan Square, where we lived for 54 years. And we're very happy there. But both Ann, my wife, and I are retired now. Been retired from teaching for 14. This is my 14th year of retirement and enjoying it. But our kids and our grandkids are in Brooklyn, and Ann has family here as well. And we wanted to spend more time with them, like a lot of old folks like to spend time with their grandkids. But many are fortunate to have them in the same city, but ours we're 800 miles away. So we decided that we would rather be here than in Chicago. Although I love Chicago, and
I bet you do. And I have grandkids in both places, kids and grandkids, both in New York and Queens, and here in Chicago. And we're trying to get a couple of them to move back here too. So anyhow.
Yeah, well, my kids made it very clear that they were not coming back to Chicago. So it was up to us to come here.
Well, tell us a little bit about Zohran Mamdani.
Well, when I got here last June, a year ago June, the incumbent mayor, Eric Adams, who was a former cop, was involved in all kinds of illegal activities and was being investigated by a grand jury. And it looked like pretty sure that he was going to get indicted for really low-level stuff. You know what I mean? It was like, it kind of reminded me of Chicago in the sense that you can buy a politician for very little, you know. And I remember when Rostenkowski, right, got busted for stealing stamps. So it didn't take much to buy a Chicago politician, and apparently it doesn't take much to buy a New York mayor. So it's one of the things that made me feel at home here. So that was the kind of the political situation. Adams was in trouble. He's a first-term mayor, and so people were looking to see who was going to replace him. I liked a guy named Brad Lander. Brad Lander was the comptroller at the time and came out of the housing movement in Brooklyn in the 70s. In fact, I knew him. I knew about him from the Fifth Avenue Committee that he was the leader of back in the late 70s. And he's a progressive guy. And I went to a meet and greet with him at a local restaurant here in Park Slope, and I liked what he said, and he seemed like a pretty interesting guy. But meanwhile, I was checking my phone and my computer and on TikTok, and suddenly there appeared this guy on TikTok who was doing these very interesting little videos, interviewing people on the streets of Queens, for example, and asking them who they had voted for in the presidential election and why. And many of them had voted for Trump, and many of them had stayed home. And when he asked them why, it was clear that it was mainly the fact that the Democratic Party was not speaking to them. and that they were looking for alternatives. And so whether they stayed home or voted for Trump, the reasons were pretty much the same, and that was that the Democrats were not speaking to them. And he was going to, and so in response, Zohran Mamdani, who was a member of DSA and a state assemblyman for a couple of terms, made it clear that he was going to throw his hat in the ring. And he did another video, just to give you an example of what he was doing. He was interviewing both the halal cart owners. Brooklyn and New York have all these guys, mainly from the Middle East, who make their living off of selling food from carts, really good chicken and rice dishes, but they were having to charge $10, and they said we could charge it $8 if the system of giving out licensing for carts wasn't such a scam. The city would basically withhold giving carts, and so the price, like cab medallions, had multiplied out of control. It was costing thousands of dollars to get a halal cart, even though the city was charging $400 because people would buy them and would resell them for exorbitant prices. And this was an example of the way that the city, a very concrete example of the way that the city, New York, had become unaffordable. So people started watching these things, and very slowly, Zohran kind of rose in the polls because he was addressing this question of an affordable city. New York has become impossible, really, for many people to live in anymore because the price of everything is out of sight. And so I began to follow him, attended a couple of meet and greets with him, met him, talked to him, and decided that he was really the real deal. And apparently, most Democratic voters in the city decided the same thing, because in the June 24th primary, we have ranked voting here in New York, and so it's can be a complicated system, but the Mamdani campaign had it figured out pretty well. And in fact, he and Brad Lander, the candidate who I was first interested in, kind of joined forces toward the end, and they endorsed each other. And so for someone like me, I could vote for both Mamdani and for Lander, and have my vote counted. And the campaign also said, under no circumstances should you put Andrew Cuomo, the former and disgraced governor of the state, who the billionaires had put up to, and still are paying for the campaign to try and beat Mamdani. So now the primary's over. Mamdani won by double digits. This was back in June. It's now It's after Labor Day. The campaign is back running again in earnest, and he's still holding in all the polls. He's still holding a double-digit lead over Cuomo and over Eric Adams. But Mike, I just want to tell, I didn't want to get too much into the politics of it, because I think you know that, and I think most of your listeners know that he's the progressive candidate, a Muslim immigrant socialist, democratic socialist candidate. But I want to go back, and I know you can resonate to this, because it reminds me so much of back in the 80s when Harold Washington was running for mayor of Chicago, and the absolute joy of that campaign, the good humor of that campaign, the excitement, the fact that it was a youth movement, that people were and the Mamdani campaign is a youth movement. The people are the 60,000 people that he has. I'm too old to knock on doors. I got to tell you, I can't do it. I can't climb these tenement buildings in Brooklyn to go knock on doors, but I can make phone calls, is what I've been doing. But it's the young people that have been knocking on doors, and it so much reminds me of Harold back in the 80s when he first ran and said, "You want me to run? Then you got to register 50,000 new voters." And people went out and did it. And you remember when Harold was at the Heartland many times, right?
For 2 times.
2 times.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, it was so exciting and liberating, and boy, I remember the night he won that primary, and then I remember the night he won the election. I mean, it was great.
I recall going to rallies for Harold in Logan Square. Each new rally at the Norwegian Center over on Kedzie and Fullerton, the crowds would get bigger and bigger until they were coming out of the doorway and standing out on the street. And when Harold spoke, it wasn't a moan and groan about the state of affairs. He had people laughing and excited. I remember going to hear Harold after he was elected, when he was fighting the Verdoliak gang over at Quinn Memorial Chapel, and he got up on the platform and he said, "I remember he said, I am not Monty Hall, and this is not let's make a deal," and the crowd just burst out into laughter, and that's exactly the kind of tone and spirit of the Mamdani campaign. It's not no one's moaning around it. People are excited about it, and I want to convey that's it's not just about the politics, but it's really about the spirit and the excitement and the joy of his campaign.
Well, I've got 3 kids and their spouses all in New York, who they're all voting for Mamdani.
Well, as Zohran says, when Governor Cuomo during the early debates had a hard time with the name, or maybe he didn't have a hard time. It was like when they constantly mispronounced Obama's name or Kamala's name, but he couldn't say Mamdani, and finally Zohran turned to him and said, "It's learn to say it. It's Mamdani. You got to better learn how to say it," and he can say it now.
Well, what about the opposition? I mean, I understand that Cuomo is trying to win his seat, that seat, and Adams is trying to hold on to his, and then you got this guy
Curtis Sliwa.
Yeah, I remember
He's a
him.
Republican.
They wore berets and kind of looked like revolutionary, but from the right. What's going on with the Democratic establishment? I mean, with Mamdani in the lead and even sometimes cracking 50% in some of the polls I saw. You have Hakeem Jeffries, number 1 Democrat in the House. You have Schumer, who is the number 1 Democrat in the Senate. They have not come out for him. And I don't know if there's a split going on, if there are other Democrats that you know of that are endorsing this candidate, or if they're all holding back, and why?
Oh no, the local electeds in New York have all rallied around Zohran. In fact, just the other day, the head of the Bronx Democratic Party endorsed, but the state assemblymen, the members, those in the General Assembly, the local city council members are all except for all those who should be endorsing him have been endorsing him. But you're absolutely right. At the national level, Jeffries, who somebody I think some rapper the other day referred to him as AIPAC Shakur because he's bought and paid for by AIPAC, the pro-Israeli lobbyist. But you're right, and Schumer shamefully is not. But and neither has Hochul, the Democratic governor. They may come around, but it doesn't really matter. Nobody's waiting on Jeffries or Schumer to endorse. And you're right; it does represent a fundamental split. I think a division within the Democratic Party between the old guard, the establishment people, those who get their money from the billionaires and from the pro-Israeli lobbyists, and the younger candidates, younger Democrats, minority Democrats, Black, brown Democrats, who are no longer they don't feel connected to those people anymore, and many of them are beginning to leave. Many of these old guard, like in Manhattan, the longtime congressman, who was a pretty progressive guy, actually, is not running again. He's like 78 years old, and now, and he looked at what happened to Biden and even to old man Trump, and they're saying it's time for the young people to take over. That's why I say this Mamdani movement is really a youth movement, the kind we remember when we were that age. You know, it's full of that kind of enthusiasm and spirit and excitement. So whether Jeffries or Schumer ever do endorse, that's their problem. That's their problem. They have to carry. Mamdani carried Jeffries' district, so he's got to answer to the voters in his district if he refuses to endorse them.
That congressman that resigned is, I think, Gerald Nadler is his name.
Yes, that's right.
And he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Well, we have one of the things that I saw in the New York Times was a thing about Zohran Mamdani. I'm going to get it. That he has stepped back on some of his early positions, like defunding the police, decriminalizing prostitution. And, you know, he's a member of the DSA. You referred to DSA. That's the Democratic Socialists of America. And he has stepped back a little bit. Now, I can understand that as, you know, a lot of ideologues want everyone to be pure. But in the reality, we've learned as we get older, I think, and I hope we aren't making too many compromises, you can't get everything you want in one at bat. You know, you got to see it as a long-term process. Your thoughts on some of these issues?
Well, I think your view on this is exactly right, and I agree. Of course, the New York Times, has been awful on this campaign. They refused to endorse Mamdani. In fact, they claim not to endorse anybody, but really they were biased around Cuomo, and they haven't been, not only on the editorial side, but the reporting has been terrible on this campaign. But let me say, the thing that's really, I think, significant about the strategy of the Mamdani campaign has been that he has been laser focused on the issue of affordability. His demands for free and fast buses, for grocery stores, for freezing the rent on rent stabilized, on the 2 million rent stabilized units in New York City, on childcare in the city. He is laser focused on the issue of affordability. And if you go to a campaign rally, he'll talk about these four issues, and the audience will all repeat them back, because he's made this it's really a lesson in running a campaign, I think, is that his campaign is easy to understand. It reflects the real conditions of the city, and people have gravitated towards it. And all these other issues that people want to bring in about prostitution or other, is only an attempt to drag him away from what are these four issues. And the only exception around this is that they may be talking about prostitution, some of his enemies, but really what they're talking about is that he has not stepped away from his full support for Palestine and for an end to the genocide in Gaza. He's been clear about this, and as much as the Zionists and the establishment Democrats have tried to beat him up over this issue, even the Jewish voters of New York City, of which there are 1 million, over 900,000 Jewish voters, the majority of which are supporting Mamdani in this election.
On that note, let's talk about rabbis in New York. As you might know, my daughter just got married, and she and her husband are a member of a synagogue in Brooklyn. I'm not sure where in Brooklyn, but Schumer is a member of that synagogue. However, the rabbi told me that while he had grown up reading The Forward, which is a progressive Jewish magazine or newspaper, he says Schumer didn't read it, or he doesn't read it. But 11, I'm just thinking end of July, there were 11 rabbis, including the one from my kids' synagogue. They got arrested protesting in front of the Israeli consulate over Gaza. And I would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about 900,000 Jews in New York and how they are, many of them are supporting Mamdani.
Not just supporting Mamdani, but I think, Mike, that the tide has turned on this issue of Israel for many Jews, young Jews especially, and calling for defense of Israel just doesn't fly anymore in these elections. And I think Schumer and Jeffries and Hochul and some of these Richie Torres, the congressman up just in one of the areas of New York, who's a big recipient of AIPAC money. If it's not based on their beliefs, they think that they need to take this position in order to get the AIPAC is like the Jewish NRA, right? That they throw tons of money into these elections, but I don't think that money is working anymore, and it certainly hasn't worked in the New York election. And if you can't win over the Jewish voters of New York City with this kind of campaign, if you can't do it in New York, you can't do it anywhere, because this, like I say, this is the largest Jewish population outside of Israel in the world, and so it goes back to that debate in the primary when all the candidates were up on, all the Democratic candidates were up on the stage, and the question was, where's the first place you're going to visit when you get elected? And every single candidate, I think there might have been 11 of them up there, all said Israel. They were going to go to Israel as their first place. And when it got to Zohran, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. If I want to talk to Jewish vote, I'll do it here in New York. There's a job to be done in New York." But they didn't let that go. Then they had a follow-up question only for Zohran. And they said, "Well, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist?" And Zohran said, "I believe Israel has a right to exist as a fully democratic state with equal rights for everybody," which, of course, is not the Zionist conception of what Israel should be. So I think the tide has turned, and we won't see that again.
Well, let me just say as we close out. Governor Pritzker, who I think has been on fire on a lot of issues, and he has to be because we're being challenged here, as you know. He came out, I saw a thing, and now I start thinking, well, I better check all these things, but he basically came out for no more aid to Israel.
That's right.
I think he's playing it smart, and he really sees it.
Fred, listen, good luck to you all of you back in Chicago. We got our eyes on you with the Trump's invasion.
I'm getting texts and stuff from people. Stay strong, Chicago, kind of thing. And we will. There've been some big demonstrations. I'd like to let everyone know that I think Indivisible has called for their next mass mobilization for October 18th. I could be wrong on the date, but I heard it from. Is that right? That's right. My wife tells me that's where I got the info. Okay, well, I'll join the others in saying stay strong, and I know you will. I mean, you guys are tough. We are. Well, we're Chicago people, and New York is next to Chicago. I like New York. I was born in New York City. I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan until they left. You're still a Brooklyn Dodger fan in LA now. I'm rooting for the White Sox.